Hi there. In Gnosticism, as I understand it anyway, there are two gods, either literally existent or at least figuratively so in the consciousness of the seeker. The one God is utterly transcendent, good, non-dualistic, and occupies or is the infinite realm within, and the non-dualistic realm that could be said to exist above, in quotation marks, the world that we live in at the moment. And the other god is called the demiurge, the creator god. And ultimately, this god is not only finite in its power, but it is also evil in the sense of destructiveness. Because when you think about it, obviously there are destructive forces attached to everything and every situation and every person and every social institution and every ecosystem and every being and every plant and everything. But also the act of creation itself can involve destruction of another ecosystem or being or system, and the preservation of existing systems can often involve the destruction of other competing systems, or people or institutions or societies or communities, if I was going to reduce the idea of the world down to the human level. And so ultimately, this creator God is ruthless, exploitative, manipulative, predatory. And there's no getting away from that at all. And the worlds are as they are, finite worlds. And from scarcity arises fear and greed, pretty much for all sentient beings, whether they're incarnate or discarnate, that belong to either this world, physical world, or to pretty much, all the worlds, right up to the etheric level worlds. Even they are governed by fear and greed to a certain extent, although there it is slightly more ambiguous as to exactly what's going on at the ultimate etheric level. Um, and, one of these things people say, well, what's your evidence for these two gods? And one tiny bit of evidence that I was thinking about today, which perhaps is very fanciful on my part, I don't know, and that's the observation that I've had, that basically anything which is ethical is pretty largely ineffective. And when I think of, some kind of people have good intentions, let us say, but they are largely ineffective. And sometimes, despite their intentions, they end up making a worse mess than the people that have selfish or bad intentions. And, in particular, I was thinking, of sort of folk healing. I mean, it may be ethical on one level, but it is largely ineffective on another level. Or at least it's only 20% effective on 20% of the population, 20% of the time. Whereas pharmaceuticals are pretty effective, and nowadays pretty, they have minimal side effects, or at least that's what they try for now. And they are very effective. And yet they have been obtained through unethical experiments on animals and even on people. As somebody said, of course, that the human population, is the ultimate experimental guinea pig for pharmaceutical companies to play with, which I'm afraid is true to a large extent, although not to the extent that critics would have you believe, I think. But in any case, certainly when one thinks of anything like ethical politics or ethical economics, or socialism or anything like that. Largely ineffective, with sometimes with its own side effects, which can be rather negative. Side effects that were not intended to arise, but which do because of human nature, which is, of course, bound to scarcity, fear, greed, ambition, avarice, and to the forces of destruction, which are present even within the forces of creation and preservation, which is the characteristic of the finite worlds, the so-called lower worlds, the world of the demiurge, the creation of the demiurge. So this gives rise to an intriguing question, really. So if what is ethical is largely ineffective, does this mean that what is largely unethical is effective? And although it could be that could be a rather a rather sweeping generalization, it could be that that is really the situation. That to be effective in the finite world, the lower worlds, the world of the demiurge, you do have to be ruthless. Maybe not as ruthless as you might think you have to be, but certainly that ruthlessness comes into it, and exploitation, manipulation, predation could be at the bottom of the basis of your work, and even part of a subconscious agenda that you have, which you don't even realize. So you don't even realize you are being negative, because your intention was positive all the time, really, it didn't change. But you don't really see how negative the effects of your actions are. And this is another characteristic of the lower worlds. So it gives rise to the fact that if everything that is ethical is largely ineffective, then this would seem to me to suggest that perhaps there is a world where the unethical and the ethical really don't matter, and being effective and ineffective really don't count.